And then, one morning, after years of silent suffering and functioning on autopilot, I woke up and I asked myself, is this it?
Welcome to Creativity with Purpose, where we explore the stories, struggles, and sparks that shape our creative lives. I'm your host, Anne Murachek, author, healer, and believer in the power of meaningful expression. Together, we'll dive deep into what it means to create with heart, live with intention, and heal through the beauty of storytelling. Hello, everyone. I'm Anne Murachek, and welcome to Creativity with Purpose. Today, we are interviewing Marcel Vogeli. And after a vibrant international career in tourism and fashion, Marcel Vogeli's life took a dramatic turn following a serious car accident in Turkey and a later diagnosis with an aggressive autoimmune disease. What began as a journey of physical healing became a profound inner transformation. Driven by a deep search for meaning, he discovered The Key to Self-Liberation by Christiane Beerlandt, a moment that changed everything. For the past 12 years, Marcel has worked closely with Christiane's legacy alongside Dr. Lipin's, passionately advocating for a more conscious, self-aware approach to health and life. Today, he shares his story to inspire others on the path of self-liberation and authentic living. Welcome, Marcel. This is going to be a delightful conversation. I can already tell just by our little pre-chat. So I understand that you went through a traumatic injury. And I don't know if you know this about me, but that is one thing that we share, unfortunately, in common. When I was 16, I had my neck broken in a horrific car crash and should have died, should be a paraplegic today. And through, I believe, the healing intent, the power of spirit, I have lived a very full, relatively unencumbered life. I still am a chronic pain patient. I still have limitations, but I have managed to push through all of that and still be creative with purpose. And I know you need to share with us what started this journey for you.
Yeah, hi, Anne. It's really lovely to see you, and thank you for having me.
Absolutely.
You know, I always believe there's a meaning behind moments when we're brought together, and I believe this is one of those moments.
Yes.
Now, in fact, in my late 20s, I really believed that I had found my calling.
Oh,
I was living the dream. I was working abroad for a tour operator first. I was traveling across countries. I was basking the sun, absorbing all different cultures and cuisines. And it felt like life was opening up, full of excitement and promise.
yes,
But, just like you just mentioned, everything changed in an instant.
exactly.
And I think there are stories are similar because while driving through the inlands of Turkey, my car crashed into a water well and I broke my back.
Mhm.
I suffered severe whiplash and, my vibrant mobile life came to a brutal halt.
Exactly.
And
One
that's what you need
explosion
to.
of pain and sound, and everything was different.
And then, all of a sudden it gives you a sign from life, which I did not realize at that time.
Mhm.
But the fact is that I wanted to continue. I wanted to resume my career, and still, inside you felt something had shifted fundamentally.
Yes. Right.
Now, I continued, stubborn as I am.
Yes, I understand that.
You understand that? I can see
I do. I do.
that.
Sometimes the universe has to scream at you. Yes.
Right, very loud sometimes. Now,
Yes.
what I did after I continued in tourism, and after a year of living in Cuba, and and tried to attempting to restart my journey,
Yes.
and life threw another curveball at me. At that moment, I was diagnosed with an aggressive autoimmune disease.
Mm.
And yes, I had to go back to Belgium. And I had a bi-monthly IV treatments through
Mm.
Baxter's. And when something like that happens, it feels, or it felt at the time, that life had hit a pause button, but
Hmm.
permanently.
Oh. Hmm.
Again, still in my end 20s, still stubborn. I was determined not to give up.
Right, of course.
So I continued. I started studies. I earned my degree in marketing, and I worked my way up to as an international purchasing manager in an apparel company and sourcing manufacturers in Southeast Asia, negotiating deals.
Hmm.
But still beneath the surface, my body was wagging war. The medications caused relentless side effects.
Hmm.
Underwent surgeries, treatments, and you could say basically hospitals became a second home.
Oh
But yet
my.
I kept pushing forward, hiding the exhaustion behind this professional ambition which I had.
Hmm.
And then, one morning, after years of silent suffering and functioning on autopilot, I woke up and I asked myself, is this it?
Yeah.
So my body was tired and literally my spirit was drained.
Hmm.
And just as I was questioning everything, my doctor delivered even more devastating news. The treatments that I had been taking for 8 years needed to be intensified, and
Mm.
then I cracked. And that day, I quit my job, and I could no longer pretend.
Right.
And
You have
then
to
for
face this full on.
exactly, and that was this crack moment, which a human being needs sometimes, because I also learned that being stubborn is looks very good in the society, and you have to force yourself and you have to continue and you have to go on, you have to achieve. But anyways, after I cracked for nearly a year, I wondered. I was seeking clarity. I was seeking a deeper truth behind everything that had happened. You know, I felt that there had to be more to life
Hmm.
than this endless rat race. There had to be more than just surviving. And, I was searching for meaning, for joy. And, at the end, I was searching for myself.
Yes, of course.
Now, and there comes Christiane one day, and you could say almost by chance, but now I know there is no coincidence. Everything happens for a reason.
The
I found,
synchronicity.
exactly, I found myself in his bookstore, and there it was, a copy of The Key to Self-Liberation. I picked it up, and I instinctively flipped to the section describing my disease.
Oh.
And what I read, it struck me to the core.
Hmm.
It was as if her words had been written just for me.
Yeah.
Now, in the progress of, evolving, I met Christian and Dirk, Dr. Lippens and Christiane Beerlandt, and I had the honor and I do still have the pleasure to work with Dirk since Christian has left our three-dimensional world.
Hmm.
And I have, ever since worked very close with her books and her legacy. Now, her insight didn't just comfort me, they radically transformed my understanding of health, of consciousness,
Hmm.
of who I truly am. And today I'm deeply committed to sharing her life-changing work with others. And I know, what it means to lose yourself
Yes.
and what it takes to come home again.
Right. Exactly. Exactly. For me, it was always a matter of being connected to what I call the universal consciousness or divine creator source. And I always had a sense of that connection. I grew up in a very dysfunctional family, only child, very profoundly alone, with parents who fought like tigers. And I was ignored a lot. I was placed into even physically and emotionally unsafe situations. And through it all, I always had this sense of being connected or protected by, if you want to call it, your angels, your guiding spirit, that inner voice that was always telling me, I'm here, you're safe, it's going to be okay, and you will get through this.
Yeah.
And it was that connection to a sense of universal mind, consciousness, awareness that was always my place of refuge and strength. And even laying on my back with a cervical collar around my neck and tears streaming down into my ears, I just knew that I was going to heal. I was going to be able to get up off of that bed at some point and start reliving my life. And I kept envisioning myself living my fullest life, being on stage, dancing, performing. And 2 years later, I was hired to sing and dance in the Palace Show at Six Flags over Mid America. In 2 years, I was performing on stage for thousands of people.
Wow.
And I had been told not only was I probably not going to survive, but I would certainly never walk again.
Mhm.
They wanted to screw a halo into my skull, put a rod down my spine. And I just said, no, I will heal. I will heal. And that inner spirit, that inner knowing, I think is something that you allude to and that you must have tapped into.
Right. I believe indeed that this inner feeling, because basically as human beings, we have a rational side and we have this, well, feeling side. And
Yes.
in between you have these emotions. And I think it's very important. And this is also what I believe so much what Christiane refers to in her books as the living life core,
Mhm.
your soul. And this is also the living life core is a part of the bigger source, which she calls life. We all feel, and if you really sit close and go deep in yourself, and you really connect with your inner core, as she refers to your soul, then you can sense, you can feel life within you.
Yes. Yeah.
And when you feel this life, you can also connect to this life power, this life force inside you.
Mhm.
And I do believe that, and there we share stories which are very alike, that when you don't want to give up, and this is not from a forcing side, but from actually a self-love,
Yes.
or your self-love, where you say, I'm not going to give up because I love myself. And self-love is not, of course, it's difficult for everyone.
Mhm.
But deep inside, we do have the self-love. And once this self-love is big enough, it radiates outside. And this is giving you the potential, the potential to self-heal, to heal your body.
Yes.
And that's what I recognize also in your story.
Yes, exactly. Yes, I've been told that if you look at my X-ray, it's profoundly confusing that I'm alive. And I'm like, well, here
You
I
look alive to me.
am. Feels pretty here. But my top vertebrae, the atlas, was crushed so profoundly that it actually dissolved.
Mhm. Wow.
So technically, my skull and my spine are not attached. I find it very funny.
Well, you know what I think is very funny now is because I also suffered from a spinal discomfort
Yeah.
as a result of the autoimmune disease, and I'm
Oh,
not able to move my neck. It's stuck.
isn't that amazing?
And therefore, and I do believe that another thing that we share in common is if we would read the part in the Key to Self-Liberation about neck,
Yes.
we could also see what we have in common and actually why we have today met, not as a coincidence, but that we
No.
share also this energy from the neck.
Isn't that interesting?
It's amazing.
It
And
is
these are
amazing.
these little miracles which I have been
Yeah.
experiencing since well, more than 12 years,
Yeah.
13 years since I first discovered the key to self-liberation, that life is so full of miracles, of
Oh,
little
absolutely.
miracles, and you can only be grateful for that.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And the connectivity, the the willingness to collaborate, the willingness to be open and vulnerable to share yourself. Because when you give, your palms are open, and that's the only way you can then receive.
Exactly.
If your hands are closed, nothing gets in, right?
Right. And
Yeah.
that is by means of hands, and that's only the body.
Yes. Yes.
But inside, there's also this divine particle, this divine part of us, this inner life core. And sometimes we should or may or can learn to receive also from this inner life core because again, you see this all around also in society. There's a lot of negativity,
Yes, there can be.
and this negativity is not always bad.
Mhm.
Christiane Beerlandt describes this as a counterforce,
Okay.
and without any judgments whether it's good or bad, because this also depends on perception.
Of course.
Now, a counterforce on itself is actually also a manifestation, which in a certain way you attract from your inner core to actually learn from it. It is a signpost. So we're
Mhm.
talking about the key to self-liberation now, because that's at this moment the only work from Christiane Beerlandt which is translated in English, but in
The English.
Dutch she has written over 22 titles. She did this over 20 years. And as far as I know, there's even more manuscripts which are not published yet. But
Mhm.
she left us tremendous work to work on. Now, also, that is no coincidence that at this moment we are working with the key to self-liberation because this contains in the first part also this life philosophy. And it's, this the way how she writes it, it is so joyful. It
Yes.
shows us that life is so beautiful, that we should be grateful about everything that happens, whether we see it as bad. It's a counterforce, a sign, a signal to show us, like, you're attracting this or that on your life's path. It's not to just, tease you or to blame you or to lead to self-blame or guilt. It is basically a sign from life itself. And some people call it universe, others prefer to call it God, but this is life, the big source. And those are signals, are signposts from life, trying to show us like what deeper beliefs, convictions, thought patterns are still blocking us from being our true us, from you being your true me.
Yeah.
Because we all have this, conscious, unconscious patterns, beliefs, which we say, oh, my dad, my mom always told me I should, behave or I should act polite, or, when you're invited to someone's place, you should always stay there. But how many people of us didn't have this experience when you were invited somewhere and you're sitting there and you're just like, okay, well, yeah, they're all kind people, but what am I doing here? And this is also one of those things that Christian says, if you're truly honest to yourself, you should be able to just politely, of course, with respect to others, you should be able to say, well, at this moment, I'm not feeling comfortable here. I wish you all a very pleasant day. Please excuse me. And
Yes.
that is also a part of being honest to yourself. But again, this is a challenging reaction because we have, of course, also not only our inner blockages, but also from society.
Yes. Yes. Absolutely. And it's interesting that you found transformation by reading her book. And the written word is so profoundly powerful. And it can transcend our perception of linear time. She can reach out with her voice to anyone who picks up that vehicle and reads. And it makes her voice an eternal gift to all of us that are still here. And I found in writing Unpacking the Attic, that was just a journal for my own self discovery and healing, very similar to what you're talking about. Um, how do I process all of these floods of childhood memories and emotions that I'm being overwhelmed with while I was emptying my parents' home for resale as they transitioned into assisted living? And each one of those childhood memories, I was actually reliving like in real time. It was as if I was the child again, transported back into that moment. But this time, now I have the perspective of an adult. Now I can talk to the child and find the lessons and find the healing and find the inner meaning of those things. And so I wrote all this down as a journal, never expecting to share it. It was my own personal healing journey and self-discovery. And then 3 a.m. one night, this is 8 years past. My father passed away, who was always the real threat. And
Mhm.
I'm sleeping. I felt like I was physically shook awake. And I hear, just as loud as we're talking, the title of your book is Unpacking the Attic. And I'm like, thank
Oh,
you. What book? I had put the thing in the file cabinet and literally forgotten about it. And I get this flash of seeing the file in the file cabinet, like this image. And then I hear it's time. So the next morning I wake up and I'm going through emails, and in my inbox, there is an email from the Steve Harrison Publishing Group. Never heard of them, didn't reach out to them. And my husband's like, well, and it's a sign, obviously, you need to call. So I called and talked to Joe, which I'm sure you know.
yes.
And he said, this is really interesting. Why don't you read me the introduction and the first couple of chapters? So I read it to him. And there's this long pause and I'm thinking, oh, he hates it, right? We always go to the worst case. And he takes this deep breath and he said, I'm crying. You've touched something very centered in my core. And I relate to this very profoundly. He said, it's time. Same words I'd heard the morning before. It's time.
Wow.
So that started me on a 9-month process to turn my own personal healing journey into Unpacking the Attic. And I'm sharing now with the world. And there's a vulnerability there. But 12 awards later, apparently it's resonating. And I feel like it was important for me to offer that healing journey to my other brothers and sisters on this plane, right? Because we're all interconnected. And I found that the connections that I have made through this process, like meeting people like you, and it just goes on and on and on, it has been tenfold back to me what I feel like I have been able to give. So that the whole journey has continued for me in this growth and healing and joy. And I have found such inner joy and such inner gratitude for the opportunity to share. And I think that connection and that willingness to say yes is something that we all have to understand, that it's okay to be vulnerable. It's okay to not be perfect. If we're giving in love to others, that love then just flows back tenfold.
Right. And that's I hear wonderful words you're saying resonating and love. That's the counterforce to counterforce. Like we spoke before, you have this what we refer to as negative, but not necessarily is bad, but it's the counterforce. But the other force is love.
Yeah.
Life is love.
Yes.
And your love is manifesting. And then I'm hearing you saying the wonderful word resonating.
Mm-hmm.
And resonating is indeed love that goes from one person to another. And basically, it only starts within yourself.
Yes.
And when this love within yourself is growing, because what I understand from your story, that you have written a book, it had been laying on the shelf for 8 years,
Yes.
and you could say there's at that moment there's a lack, there's doubt, there is
Yeah.
some disbelief if you are worth it,
Mm-hmm.
or can I do that? You
Yes.
know, am I good enough? And
Mm-hmm.
I believe those, we're all human, and I think in every human we all have these thoughts, these beliefs, and that is basically also what we're talking about in the key to self-liberation, that these this sort of patterns, conscious or unconscious,
Sure.
inside of, and then you see one moment you are manifesting this love inside you, the self-love, and look what happens. I love that story. It's
Amazing,
amazing.
isn't it?
It's wonderful.
Yeah.
It
And
is.
I told the universe, if you send the opportunity, I will say yes. And
You say
it's
no,
amazing what happens when you just say yes.
right?
It's astonishing. I know that you talked about that Christiana felt like she was getting her inspiration and her words from source. Can you talk
Yes.
more about that?
Well, you should see Christiane referred to her source, not like channeling. It is not like, she would meditate. She would just sit, and that was her great ability, her gift, in fact, that she referred to as always. It was like, according to her, she tuned in like a radio from a radio station, and this radio station she would call the frequency of truth. Now, in her books, and as I mentioned, in Dutch, there's over 22 titles.
Yes.
Um, she never ever claims that it is her wisdom. She never said it is her truth. She never said it is her. No, she logged on to this frequency of truth,
Mhm.
and she actually wrote down what she received. Um, a question could be, how did a book such as The Key to Self-Liberation, with over 1,000 diseases and symptoms, how
Yeah.
did she create a book yay thick over the course of, it first appeared in Dutch in 1993,
Okay.
and it came from people asking her all questions. And she wasn't just like, it's like this or that. She wrote it down on little notes. She closed the notes all together, and then all of a sudden, or she would take one note, hold it close to her without looking at it, and then she would just, like she like said, she would tune into this frequency of truth, and she started writing. She just started writing and later typewriting.
Mhm.
After she had finished her piece, she would open the note and see exactly what was the subject on the note written. Because first it were diseases and illnesses, but later on also signals, animals, food stuff, and so much more.
Yeah.
And this is how the books actually came to life. And um, the most wonderful thing about not only the key to self-liberation, but all the other works which I'm still using, I'm reading, I'm learning.
Uh-huh.
is that this information is so startlingly precise. It is so, you know, sometimes you have to read a sentence once, twice, three, four, five times.
Mm-hmm.
Put the book aside a
Yeah.
month, a week, a day, a year later, reread the same sentence, and you will just feel how the same sentence, the same words come in differently.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And that is so amazing because you're a living person. You are moving, you are alive.
Yes.
And being alive means that every day you have new experiences, new perceptions. And this makes it so wonderful when you reread a sentence, a word, it comes in differently.
Mm-hmm.
And there lays such a power. And that is something why I'm advocating now for her book. Because honestly, we do believe that every household should have a book like that.
Yes.
However, and that's also something I want to tell, the book, her books, should not be found by people. People are found by the book.
I understand what you're saying. Yes, exactly. The book reached out and grabbed you,
Right.
right? Because you were ready to receive it.
Exactly. When
Mm-hmm.
your frequency, when your alignment, when your vibration, so to
Yeah.
speak, is at the right height,
Mm-hmm.
then you will resonate with the information of the book. And that means when you're ready.
Yes. I think that ties into her idea of pure heart.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, pure heart is a concept, and it is not about, being perfect.
Right.
It's actually about being aligned.
That's what I was feeling. It's about matching your resonance or your vibration
Right.
to, to the higher vibration of gratitude and love.
Exactly. And she describes it like, she said, imagine your heart like a compass.
Okay.
Society shouts, go east, go west, go north. And then you have your ego, and she's not calling it ego, she calls it more, your little eye.
Okay.
Your little eye whispers, you should go south. But then the pure heart hums, here is your true north.
Mm-hmm.
And Christiane describes it as living with radical self-honesty.
Yes.
Not people pleasing,
Mm-hmm.
but also not chasing empty desires. It is the courage to say, this job, this relationship, this habit, it's not me.
Yeah,
And that is where the healing begins.
definitely. Um, I had a grandfather who never talked to me. And as a tiny child, I remember him pointing to the couch and saying, "Sit down." Those are the only two words I ever remember him saying to me. And I'm the little toddler, right? Big blue
Right.
eyes, little strawberry blonde curls, right? And I was terrified. And he and my parents would go in the kitchen and have dinner. I would smell food, I would hear conversation and laughter, and I'm just sitting there hungry. He'd come back in the room and puff on his pipe and stare out the window, and he would never talk to me. And all I ever wanted to do was sit in his lap. And as a tiny child, I internalized that as I'm a bad child. My pop doesn't love me, and I must not be lovable. I must not be worthy of being loved. And I carried that internal dialogue with me for decades. And I reached out so many times until he passed away, trying to get him to have that conversation with me. Never
Hmm.
happened, never happened. And in the process of going through my parents' home, I found his pipe. and it still smelled faintly of the cherry wood smoke he used to
Yeah.
smoke. And memories can often be triggered by scents very profoundly.
Right. Right.
And I relived that entire experience, which I had blocked. I had emotionally and mentally blocked that memory. Well, I relived it as if I was sitting there in real time. And it occurred to me that it wasn't me that was the problem. My grandmother had died, and he was in deep grief. And he didn't have any room in his heart for a toddler. He was completely shut down. Well, as a 3-year old, I don't know that, right? But now I can be my own loving parent. And I can tell the little child that's sitting on that couch, get up, walk away from that. There was nothing wrong with you. Forgive him, have compassion toward him, understand where he was, because now you're an adult and now you can. And I ended up writing Pop a letter, and I put it in a green ceramic bowl to represent his big overstuffed chair he used to sit in.
Yeah.
And I lit it. And the smoke rose to his spirit. And I had written on that note, I'm sorry you were so broken. We deserve so much more, both of us. And you missed out on one of the greatest, most profound joys of life, and that's to laugh with your grandchild. But I forgive you, and I love you. And I never was able to say those 2 words before.
Wow.
And, as that smoke rose, I got complete downwash of spirit, goosebumps everywhere. And I felt a release. I was no longer angry. I was no longer resentful. I was no longer carrying these inner self images of being unworthy, unlovable, broken. And it released all of that. And now I have a real true love and compassion for the man that was so shut down in grief that he couldn't let me in. So these transformative experiences, I think sometimes those hurts happen to us, but we need to have the courage to face them head on as adults and to reframe and repurpose with the intent to heal and forgive.
Exactly. Exactly. I believe definitely also that these moments are these very valuable moments of insight, of deep,
Yes,
profound insight. And if you even would look only from your perspective towards your inner core, actually you can also say at that moment you also forgave yourself.
yes, yes.
And if I would look at it, because of course I'm now a bystander, and I see so vividly you
Yeah.
sitting on your grandfather's lap with his pipe, and at the same time when you're explaining me, when you're telling me this story, I can feel love from this man who had lost his wife, sitting with this little toddler, you. And I imagine you were very cute when you were a small little 3 years old. And he had lots of love, but he couldn't show it.
He couldn't. Yeah.
He couldn't. Now, the circumstances for you were that probably inside you, unconsciously, there was already this belief ingrained inside
Yeah.
that probably, and I'm not judging, it came along with your birth, that you had lived this situation that was actually a man sitting there with love for his toddler, for
Yeah.
his granddaughter,
Huh?
and unable to share this love, but the love was there.
Hmm. Yeah.
Now
And as a
you loved
toddler, I
yourself,
couldn't
and
perceive it.
you couldn't. And of course, at that moment where you were, you couldn't.
Mm-mm.
And this is also so beautiful, growing up, evolving, that at that moment you can finally also understand, and you have these insights. And then, automatically, almost when you're working on yourself, this this gratefulness comes up.
Yes.
Gratefulness, because probably if you had never said on your grandfather's lap, you would have never loved him now the way as he would
Mhm.
have just say, "Hi, little girl, and I love you," and so on and so on. So there you see also there is this interconnection between people and that's what I tried to mention earlier. These are also, you could say, form of counter forces, and they're not
Mhm.
necessarily bad. In your perception, your grandfather was not there, but in his perception, he might have been wonderfully excited about sitting there with his granddaughter on his lap, but still, devastated by pain, by grief that he had lost his wife.
Mhm.
And then you had your perception, and it is your perception that you took along in your
Right.
life. And
Exactly.
it is now so beautiful that you forgave him, as you mentioned, but I believe behind that, beyond that, you also forgave yourself and you grew into more self-love.
Right. You do. And it's it's a journey that I think encourages the blossoms of joy to bloom,
That's
because I think
beautifully said.
true soul joy is not a destination. It is the continuing blossoming. It's that continuing manifestation of your creative purpose, of your soul's purpose, of the reason you're here.
I would even express it even stronger. It's
Uh-huh.
finally, it is about being
Yes.
in the present, in the now, being happy,
Yes.
being joyful. It just to be.
Just to be, right.
Be. And
Exactly.
that says it all.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that we have to have an understanding too that it's not just, we're not isolated. We're all interconnected. And that's not just person to person, that's with the entire Gaia, the world, the earth, all her creatures, all the living life force. I just yesterday, I was in my backyard and I was sitting there enjoying my koi pond and my little waterfall and just taking in the lovely breeze and the flowers in spring. And all of a sudden, I hear a crow and a blue jay squawk,
Wow.
squawking, squawking. And I thought, what the heck? And the blue jay swoops me and goes back to the tree and squawks and looks at me and looks at the tree. And I'm like, okay, I'm being called over. So I walk over to the tree. We have the bird feeder hanging under that big maple tree. And there is a red-tailed hawk about this large sitting there trying to hide, laying in wait for the little birds to come to the bird feeder. And I was being called over to help him.
Wow.
So I walked over and I had a conversation with the hawk. And I'm sitting there talking to this hawk, right? And I'm like, you've been discovered. You might as well move on because this ain't happening. And he looked at me and he just flew right past me and flew off.
Oh, wow.
And then, and then the blue jay squawks again, but obviously a different tone. It didn't have that alarm and that intensity. It was kind of like the all clear. And not 3 minutes later, my little goldfinches were back at the bird feeder.
Wow. This is amazing.
And I seem to have these kind of things happen to me on a regular basis. So I have an affinity with critters, I guess, which is, I guess, why I wrote My Best Friends Live in the Woods and all the animal characters, right? But
Wow.
yeah, I'm like,
Now, if
okay,
I may share you, because I'm so amazed with your story, and again, from the signals which you received, if I'm unfortunately at this moment, the book is under translation, which I told you before. There's a book Christiane wrote, and it will come out in time in English about
excellent.
animals could talk.
Yes.
And description of a blue jay, very short, because I'm not Christiane Beerlandt and I cannot put exactly the same word, the profound wording on it like she does. But very short, a blue jay has the white feathers and the black feathers, the bluish feathers.
Yeah.
And very shortly, she says, when you meet up with the blue jay asks, make a choice,
Yeah.
life or death. And when you are now telling me that first you saw the blue jay, the little prey birds, the
Yeah.
hawk, I mean, this is an amazing signal which you receive just from life, another miracle. It's another gift from life itself, which, again, from the person you are, the energy which is inside you, the connection with all the critters living in the
Yes.
woods, you have attracted this beautiful, almost divine signal, this miracle. And that is so beautiful. And I can only tell, by the knowledge, the information that I have received over the 12, 13 years from the books by Christiane Beerlandt,
Yes.
this opens up to me a complete new perspective in which I can also so much enjoy and feel, just the energy within your stories. It is amazing. It is so beautiful.
Yeah, I'm one of those people that would prefer to be barefoot. I like that connection to the earth.
Yeah,
And we have a beautiful park near our home. And I often go there at dusk and I walk, and all the little animals will come out. The deer will come out and they'll come up to me. I can be right, they come right to me and I talk to them. And sometimes I sit on the ground and they'll lay down and we just be together. It's just so lovely. Um, and I think they can feel that I love them. And I can tell them I love them with my words, but I think more than that, they just feel me.
exactly.
Yeah. Every once in a while, I feel their what they're feeling as well. So there's definitely, we are all energetic and we can all love each other and we can all connect on so many levels. But I think the higher and the more loving and the more grateful you are, the higher your own vibration is,
Exactly.
and the more profoundly you can connect with the whole web of life force. Yeah.
I fully agree with that because we are all interconnected. And
Mhm.
basically, what you're saying, you start, you feel with love. It comes from your pure heart.
Yes.
And I believe that the critters in the woods, they sense this.
Yeah. Yeah.
They can
Tell me
sense this.
about how you used her words for you to find your own way and to heal.
You know, it is very difficult to just say this or explain this in 2 words. It's very important to know that the book, The Key to Self-Liberation,
Mhm.
contains 2 parts. The first part, the introductive part, is all about the life philosophy which Christian describes. And these are basically the miraculous things we have been discussing now, which he puts into words. And again, I'm not Christian and I'm just an advocate, but the way how she writes it, and I agree, sometimes when you first read it or you're skeptical, the wording might seem odd, but once you start reading, not rationally, but with feeling,
Mm.
it's you start seeing all these different levels in her texts on again on a feeling level.
Yeah.
So first, you're reading this first part of the book, and a lot of people, when they see the book and they see all the symptoms and the diseases, illnesses, they go to the second part with the encyclopedia, and they start looking and say, oh, I have this cold or I have that, or and let's see. And of course, they will say, oh, okay, now I understand, but not profoundly. They
Mhm.
will recognize some things why they have attracted, so to speak, a certain disease. And there's no blame, of course, when I'm saying attracted. That's also described in the first part, that there is never any mentioning of blaming yourself or others. It is, again, like I mentioned before, it is life is showing you signals, and signals also in the form of a disease or
Hmm.
an illness, a symptom, a symbolism of an organ. What does an organ means? Because, it doesn't have to be always painful or negative, but it can say, oh,
Right.
well, I have heartburn today, or just, why? And most of the time, you can also connect it to what thought at the moment when you had this sensation or this pain inside you, which specific thought passed. And there you can also learn a lot from the book, but also from yourself.
Huh.
And the book is basically helping yourself to help yourself.
Right.
So you have this first part in which you have your life philosophy, and then you have the second part in which she describes the origins of a disease, but on a psychological, emotional side. And you know, it's asking you to be very, very honest towards yourself.
Mhm.
Because if you refuse to be honest and you say, oh, well, yeah, might be, but nah, it won't help you.
Right.
But people like yourself who are open to receiving, I believe when you would read or when you're reading, well, a chapter, a text, because something that happens to you or
Huh.
something that happens to somebody else. Because, for instance, if you see your neighbor having a cold, as an example, indirectly, you're also confronted with a cold.
Yes.
And it could be just helpful for you to just read when you see somebody sneezing or having a cold, like, why did I get in connection? Because there's interconnection again between people. You
Huh.
know, it's interesting to start reading cold. And of course, it is not in the first degree to you, but it's also helping you that there might be a certain conviction, a certain belief slimmering, shimmering inside you that you have been confronted with somebody with a cold, for instance. So this is also how the book works. When you're opening to observing, being honest, then the texts are opening so much information to you.
Mhm.
And that is what happened to me after reading, and trying to feel, and it is working. It's
Mhm.
working very hard and being honest.
Yeah. So, correct me if I'm wrong, but what I'm feeling is that she has a profound understanding that the physical disease is more of a manifestation of an energetic that you have been projecting or aligning with.
Yes, it is very important, first and for all, to know that she never was against, and we are also never against classical medicine.
Oh, right.
That is very important
Hmm.
because, in a certain synchronicity, you could say we're living in the year 2025. We have a lot of advanced technology.
Hmm.
And among this technology, we have a very high skilled and developed medical science. And that's no coincidence.
Right. Right. That is there for
Where four or
people.
500 years ago, people were dying from a flu,
Right.
we get a chance to take medication
Yes.
and extend to prolong our life, which gives us time to work on ourselves. And
Hmm.
this is also how we can evolve. That the fact that the medical world, classical medical world, is there is
Hmm.
very important.
Yes.
And sometimes you're hearing, in the alternative worlds, people are sometimes saying, well, against. And I'm not telling that it's, when there's something to support a medicine and you continue taking it without working on yourself, yes, you will have side effects, and yes, you will attract the side effects. Again, you should read The Wise in the Key to Self-Liberation. But if you're together with help from the classical medical world, are working on yourself, on beyond what is psychologically, emotionally inside me,
Hmm.
why? Well, there's a perfect example also. Some people catch a virus.
Yes.
Let's take two people to catch a virus. One of them getting ill, and the other one is just going on because it doesn't resonate.
Yeah.
It doesn't resonate with the inner beliefs, with the thoughts. So in that Example, somebody who catches a virus and he gets sick, it means that there are inner beliefs, and you could say it's a certain energy indeed, but
Mhm.
but basically it's on this deeper level unconsciously most of the time, because again, there's no blame.
Right.
It's written from love and with love for all people, that you can be aware that there's something inside you, why this virus which you caught is manifesting in illness or disease or a symptom.
Mhm.
And then again, the symptom is for you nothing but a sign, a signal post to just start working on yourself.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. Let me ask you a question that I enjoy asking all of my guests. What is a fulfilled life?
I'm going to be very bold now.
Excellent.
If you're asking me what is a fulfilled life, and I'm really going to be bold,
Go for it.
you would say life is final.
Okay, I understand.
What if, after you're able to heal
Hmm.
all the symptoms, all the diseases, all of the illnesses described in the key to self-liberation, if you are able through self-awareness, through becoming aware, to evolving,
Hmm.
what if death is the last disease to conquer?
Hmm.
So what is life fulfillment? Life only wants one thing, and that's life.
Okay, there you go. Excellent. Well, thank you so much. This has been an absolute delight. Um, it's wonderful of you to join us from Belgium. A
With pleasure. It is very,
delight.
very, very wonderful to talk to you.
And thank you so much.
Thank you.